First things first, quick shout out to Brian Miller Magic, magician, tech lover, world traveler, and TEDx talker. Channel linked in the upper right hand corner. Now, M100 menu settings for vlogging. Make sensible use of auto modes and save on battery life as much as possible. Now, if all you want to do is get started as quickly as possible, pause right here. These are all the exact settings I'm using. However, if you're interested in the details, stick with it. First things first, we're not going to shoot the camera in intelligent auto, we're going to shoot it in movie mode. Enter the menu, rec mode. I prefer movie auto exposure, so your mind is free to vlog. Movie mode, in which shutter speed and aperture are automatically set. Image quality, not interesting. Shooting information display, grid display. The 3x3 grid actually is the best grid in my opinion, because it's a good compromise between a grid that actually helps you in composing shots but doesn't crowd up the screen too much. Histogram, if you're going to use it, brightness makes the most sense rather than RGB. Reverse display on, because if you use the screen as a flip up screen, you want the image to flip so you're not looking at yourself upside down. Image review, turn this off, because should you take an image by mistake, you don't want to look at it afterwards anyway. Quick setting menu layout, select menu items to be displayed. Autofocus method makes sense. Image quality doesn't. Movie rack size, yes. Drive mode, no. Self timer, sometimes useful. White balance, 99% of the time auto is fine, but it's a movie setting, so it stays in there. Picture style, we need it. Auto lighting optimizer, you might or might not need. It's a video setting, so it stays. Autofocus method, face tracking and tracking, makes the most sense if you're filming yourself a lot. Focus mode, autofocus. Manual focus peaking settings. So should you use manual focus, this is a very good setting because it clearly indicates where the focus is. So turn this on. Level, high or low, only defines how bright the peaking color shows up on screen. The brighter, the better, in my opinion. Red works fine for most occasions. Sometimes at night, yellow and blue work better. Image stabilization settings. All we want is optical image stabilization via the lens, which is this mode right here, continuous, but we don't want digital image stabilization because it crops into the image and you're gonna lose resolution. So disable digital IS. No image stabilization at all. Optical image stabilization only. Optical image stabilization plus first level digital image stabilization. Optical image stabilization plus second level digital image stabilization. Lens aberration correction. If you're using a native Canon lens, the camera already has the profile. Just make sure both these options are enabled. Exposure compensation, not interesting right now. Highlight tone priority and auto lighting optimizer are options that both deal with enhancing the dynamic range of your camera via digital means. Highlight tone priority favors the highlights when it comes to exposure, so you're running less risk of having, for example, a blown out sky. Auto lighting optimizer, on the other hand, boosts the shadowy parts of your image. If you want to use one of these two options, I would definitely recommend highlight tone priority, because if you blow out the highlights, you cannot recover them in post-production, whereas you can always up the shadows a little. White balance, leave it set to auto, once again, so your mind is free to vlog. Custom white balance correction, not interesting. Picture style, there's two options. If you don't want to do post-production color grading, you can use auto or standard. If you do want to do post-production color grading, I would come to user-defined one, and as a starting point, select standard, and then completely de-sharpen, fineness and threshold are good at 4. Completely decontrast and completely desaturate, because this will give you the flattest possible image the camera can produce and will give you the most options in post-production. Now, color tone refers to skin tone. If you're pretty pale like myself, you're going to benefit from a more yellowish skin tone, so a plus setting, rather than a more reddish skin tone, which is a minus setting. You can also leave this set to 0 if you're kind of in between. If you've got dark skin, you're cool because you're always going to look good. Since I like to do post-production color grading, I leave this at user-defined 1. Drive mode, not interesting right now. Self-timer, well, use it when you need it. Movie rec size, I like to shoot 50 frames per second, full HD, not because I necessarily like the fluid motion of the 50 frames per second better, but because I can always go from 50 frames per second to 25, but not from 25 to 50. Also, if you're shooting 50 frames per second, you have the option of a 50% slow motion if you go back to 25 frames per second. So for me, 50 frames per second it is. Sound recording, leave this set to auto, it's the best option for internal microphones. Wind filter and attenuator, turn the wind filter off and rather use micro wind muffs for wind protection. If you want to know how to apply these, check out the video that I've linked in the top right hand corner. Attenuator, on the other hand, is a very good option. I will always keep set to on because it's going to make sure you're getting the cleanest possible signal. Movie servo AF, which is Canon lingo for continuous autofocus. Of course, we want that. Autofocus with shutter button during video, turn to on, because sometimes the only way to hit focus is by forcing focus, and you can do that via half pressing the shutter button. Auto slow shutter is a feature that I don't like because, for example, when you're shooting 50 frames per second, the auto slow shutter will enable the camera to go to a shutter speed of 1/25th of a second, which will kill your fluid motion. Technically, during one shot, you could go from fluid to regular to fluid motion, which is something that I dreadfully hate, because I want to make it a deliberate decision whether I'm shooting fluid motion or regular motion. So I keep auto slow shutter turned off. Create folder for vlogging. Daily makes the most sense. File numbering continuous. This way you're getting individual folders containing individual files for each day. Video system, I'm from Europe, so I'm shooting PAL. If you're from North America, for example, you're shooting NTSC. Eco mode turned off because this allows me to go into the power saving options. Display off, 1 minute works fine for me. Here you're gonna have to experiment to see what setting works best for you. Auto power down, for me, 3 minutes is the best setting. Once again, you might have to experiment a little. Display brightness, 3 is a very good standard value. Only in bright sunlight, 4 or 5 makes sense. Note this though, you're gonna kill a lot of battery life using 4 or 5 for a long period of time. At night, even 2 or 1 usually work fine. Time zone, daytime language, not interesting right now. Beep, turned off. Operation volume off, because the less attention you attract via beeps and whatnot for vlogging, the better. Hints and tips, for example, if you select a shooting mode, this is the tip right here. Me personally, I don't need it. Mode icon size, big with info or small with no info. Big with info looks like this. Small with no info looks like this. Your choice. Touch operation, sensitive, screen auto lock settings, not interesting right now. Sensor cleaning, auto cleaning enabled, so whenever you turn the camera off, it automatically cleans the sensor. Every once in a while, you can hit clean now to clean it an additional time. Wi-Fi connection, wireless settings, not interesting right now. Not interesting, not interesting. Technically here you could reset the camera. Firmware, custom functions. Number 1, exposure is grayed out because we're currently in auto exposure mode. If we go into Manual exposure mode, custom functions number 1 is not grayed out anymore, and you could technically expand the ISO. Natively for video it goes to 6400, you could expand it to 12800, which is a setting that I really don't recommend because it looks terrible anyway. We're going back to movie auto exposure, and we're going to continue with custom functions number 2, others. Release shutter without lens. You can actually enable this because this way you can shoot video or take a still even if you have a completely manual non-electronic lens attached to the camera that won't even be recognized by the camera as a lens. Retract lens on power off. If you're using a lens that has a power zoom, it will retract on power off. If you don't have a lens that has a power zoom, it doesn't matter, so you can always leave this enabled. Here you can set the function of the shutter button and clicking left on the click wheel. In my estimation, forcing focus and locking the exposure are the best options. And here you could clear all custom functions. And this is how I set up an M100 for vlogging. So if you liked the video, if you found it helpful, please make sure to leave a thumbs up. It's greatly appreciated. Any kind of comment or feedback is welcome, and I'll try to answer as quickly as possible. As always, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for watching, and hopefully see you again soon.